There are places in the world that hold more than just memories. They possess echoes, whispers of the past that linger as shadows, weaving through walls and slipping beneath doors. Aveline Manor was one of these places, a vast Victorian estate, set alone in the rolling countryside, miles from the nearest neighbor. Once the residence of the elusive Moore family, the manor had been abandoned for years, standing like a silent sentinel against the overcast sky. The Moores disappeared one bitter winter, leaving behind a legacy of secrets, strange happenings, and unanswered questions. Now, Aveline Manor is silent, but not forgotten. Claire, a young historian with a fascination for unsolved mysteries, arrives to uncover the truth of the manor's history. Her previous explorations had taken her to crumbling castles and eerie forests, but there was something different about Aveline Manor, something that gnawed at her nerves and made her feel as though the house itself was watching. Perhaps it was the way the building loomed against the horizon, or the feeling that each window was a dark eye, waiting for her to cross the threshold. Have you ever felt like a place was alive, like it was watching you? Claire murmurs to herself as she approaches the manor. It is late autumn, and a pale light filters through the heavy clouds as Claire's footsteps echo along the stone path leading up to the front entrance. Leaves crunch beneath her boots, carried on a sharp breeze that seems to whisper as it slips between the ancient trees lining the property. Aveline Manor stands tall and imposing, its narrow windows staring out like hollow eyes, and its steep, pointed roofs almost scraping the gray sky. At the door, Claire hesitates. The wood is weathered, cracked from years of neglect, yet its presence feels as daunting as an iron gate. She breathes in deeply, willing herself to move forward, and finally steps inside. The air within is thick, almost suffocating, as if it holds decades of dust and secrets. Claire can feel the silence pressing in on her, every sound magnified, the soft rustle of her jacket, the creak of the floorboards underfoot, the distant ticking of a long-stopped clock. Draped sheets cover furniture in the grand hall, and darkened portraits line the walls, their subjects obscured by the layers of dust. In the dim light, shadows gather in corners and crawl across the walls, stretching like fingers toward her. As she ventures deeper, each footfall seems louder, more intrusive, like she's disturbing something that has waited in silence. In the oppressive quiet, Claire's own heartbeat becomes deafening, and she finds herself tensing, listening for any hint of movement beyond her own. Imagine being alone in a place like this. Would you stay, knowing something might be watching? That first night, Claire decides to stay in a modest guest room on the main floor. The bed is narrow, the only other furnishing a small mirror on the wall, its glass slightly cracked. She lies awake, surrounded by the weight of the house, listening to the stillness settle around her. Just as she's drifting into a restless sleep, she hears it, a soft tapping, like the sound of knuckles rapping against wood, coming from somewhere outside her door. At first, the noise is faint, barely discernible. Claire tries to brush it off, assuming it's the house settling, but the tapping persists, steady, almost rhythmic. Her heart pounds as she sits up, the noise growing louder in the stillness. Claire stares at the door, uncertain whether to investigate or wait it out. After a long moment, the tapping fades, leaving only the thick silence of the manor. Hours pass, and Claire finally drifts into a light sleep. Yet just before dawn, the sound begins again, this time louder and seemingly closer. Gathering her courage, she rises from the bed, crosses the room, and opens the door to peer into the empty hallway. The corridor stretches out in shadows, darker than before, and for a moment, Claire swears she sees a faint shape vanish around a corner. She stands there, watching the empty hall, feeling as though something has pulled back, waiting for her to make the next move. With her heart pounding, Claire decides to retreat, but her curiosity refuses to leave her in peace. She spends the next day combing through the manor's library, poring over letters, journals, and old family records left behind by the Moores. One particular entry catches her eye, a note from a young girl named Rose, who wrote of a shadowy figure she called the Watcher. Rose described the figure as a presence that would stand at the foot of her bed, watching her through the night, its eyes like dark mirrors. Claire shivers as she reads, glancing around the library, as if expecting to find those same eyes upon her. The room, dimly lit by the muted light from tall windows, seems to darken, and the faintest sound echoes from somewhere nearby. A dragging noise, as if something heavy were being pulled across the floor. The noise grows louder, drawing closer, each creak and scrape like a pulse in the silence. Claire sets the journal down, her nerves taut, every instinct telling her to flee. She steels herself, stepping into the hallway where the sound continues, and follows the noise down a narrow, twisting corridor until she reaches a staircase leading into darkness. Hesitating at the top of the stairs, she feels the air grow colder, thick with a sensation that presses down on her, as if warning her to stay away. But curiosity propels her forward. Claire steps onto the stairs, each creak magnified, descending into the unknown. At the bottom, she finds a small, dimly lit room filled with shelves of peculiar objects, dusty books, jars holding strange artifacts, all cloaked in shadow. A single chair sits in the center of the room, facing a blank wall. The chair feels wrong, as if it had been placed there for a reason. As she approaches, she hears her name, whispered softly, almost tenderly, as if by someone standing directly beside her. Claire spins around, her heart racing, but the room is empty. She's alone, yet the oppressive silence feels heavy, as though something unseen is closing in. Imagine hearing your name in the dark. Would you search for the voice, or would you run? Unable to ignore the feeling, Claire steps closer to the chair, her breath shallow. Her eyes drift over the odd symbols carved into the walls, and she feels the chill grow more intense. She knows she shouldn't linger here, that something is terribly wrong, but the weight of the silence feels like it's gripping her, urging her to stay. As she leaves the room, the sense of being watched intensifies. Every step up the staircase is a struggle against an unseen force, the shadows seeming to deepen as she ascends. She reaches the top, breathing a sigh of relief, but as she pauses in the hall, she feels a chill brush against the back of her neck. Her name sounds again, a whisper, so close it sends a shiver through her entire body. What would you do if you felt a presence right behind you? Claire wonders, the eerie voice echoing in her mind. Would you turn around, or would you walk away? Determined to confront whatever haunts Aveline Manor, Claire makes her way back to the hall where she first encountered the mirror. Her gaze is drawn to its glassy surface, where her own reflection stares back. But something feels wrong. Her reflection's expression seems off, like it's holding a secret. She watches, her eyes widening as the image before her subtly shifts, her reflection's lips curving into a faint, twisted smirk. A strange fear grips Claire as she reaches out, her fingers brushing the cold glass. The surface seems to ripple under her touch, and she feels a magnetic pull as if the mirror itself wants to draw her in. Her reflection's eyes darken, hollow and knowing, a distorted version of herself, as though she's looking at a shadow, a part of her that was never meant to exist. What if your reflection reached out to you? Would you reach back? Suddenly, the mirror seems to swallow her hand, pulling her forward, and Claire stumbles, falling through the glass into a world of shadows. She lands in a twisted version of Aveline Manor, a place of muted colors and oppressive silence. Shadows move along the walls, seeming to watch her, and the air is thick with a scent of decay. The rooms here are both familiar and strange, each corridor twisting and stretching as if alive. Claire's footsteps echo as she moves deeper into the manor's darkened heart, shadows drifting just at the edge of her vision. At the grand staircase, she freezes. A figure stands at the top, cloaked in darkness, with hollow eyes fixed on her. It begins to descend, each step slow and deliberate, its gaze never wavering. Claire's pulse races as she realizes this is the Watcher, the figure that haunted Rose's writings, a being of shadow and hunger. Would you confront the unknown, or would you run? But Claire is frozen in place as the figure approaches. Its eyes are dark voids, filled with a terrible knowing. She feels her strength draining, as if it's feeding on her fear, consuming her. Summoning her last ounce of willpower, she whispers, "I won't be forgotten." In a last surge of defiance, Claire stands her ground, refusing to surrender to the darkness. The shadows press in, but her will holds strong, a spark of light against the consuming dark. As Claire stands, her eyes locked onto the Watcher, she feels a surge of resilience, a determination that roots her to the spot even as the figure draws closer. The silence around them deepens, thickening like a heavy fog, pressing against her senses. Yet there, in the cold grip of Aveline Manor, she feels something ignite within her, a fierce will to uncover the secrets that cling to the manor like a shroud. The figure reaches the bottom of the stairs, its form flickering as though made of shadow itself. It halts, just inches from Claire, and she catches a glimpse of its face, pale, gaunt, and with eyes like empty pits, voids that seem to pull her into their depths. The figure's mouth opens, whispering her name in a voice that sounds both ancient and otherworldly, a voice that chills her to the bone. Claire, it breathes, a sound that lingers in the air like smoke. You came to know the secrets of this place, but secrets do not leave here. She steels herself, taking a shaky breath, her hands clenching into fists. I came to learn the truth, she replies, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. What happened here? Why are you haunting this place? The Watcher tilts its head, its hollow eyes narrowing as though contemplating her question. Slowly, it extends a skeletal hand, pointing toward the heart of the manor, a darkened corridor leading toward the library. Without thinking, Claire's feet move forward, her body compelled by a strange force, as if she's been granted a rare invitation to witness what lies hidden. As she walks, the shadows deepen around her, closing off the world she knows. The once grand hallway stretches, becoming narrow and oppressive. The portraits lining the walls seem to shift and turn, eyes following her with silent judgment. The silence becomes a hum, a faint murmur of voices, whispering words she cannot understand, but that resonate with fear and anguish. The library looms before her, its door slightly ajar, an invitation she can't refuse. She pushes it open, the hinges groaning like a reluctant sigh, and steps inside. The room is much the same as before, but darker, as though the very air has thickened with secrets. The shelves tower over her, lined with old, leather-bound books, each one labeled with names she doesn't recognize. And there, in the center of the room, stands the Watcher. It gestures to a particular book on the shelf, and Claire steps forward, her hand trembling as she reaches for it. The cover is worn, the leather cracked, and the title is faintly embossed in faded gold, The Moore Family. Flipping through its pages, she discovers handwritten accounts detailing each member of the Moore family, their histories entwined with a darkness that defies reason. Strange rituals, unexplained disappearances, visions of otherworldly figures, all of it chronicled in haunting detail. She reads about Rose, the youngest of the family, who had written about the Watcher and described feeling trapped within the manor, sensing a presence that demanded to be remembered, to be feared. One passage catches her eye, scrawled in hurried handwriting. Asterisk, we tried to escape, but the manor, it keeps us here. Our memories, our shadows, they linger. We are all trapped, each of us bound to its darkness, asterisk. Claire's pulse quickens as she realizes the truth. The Moores had never left. They were bound to the manor, lingering as echoes in its halls, their spirits trapped within the walls like insects in amber. Each of them had become a part of the house, their souls consumed by the relentless hunger of the Watcher. Suddenly, the room grows colder, and the silence thickens until it feels like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She looks up from the book, her eyes wide as she feels a presence close behind her. The Watcher stands at her shoulder, its hollow eyes gazing into her own reflection in the dusty glass of a nearby cabinet. She sees herself in that reflection, pale, terrified, and strangely distorted, as though she too is becoming part of the shadows. No, Claire whispers, her voice barely audible. I won't be another shadow here. With renewed determination, she clutches the book to her chest and backs away from the figure, retreating toward the doorway. The Watcher's gaze follows her, dark and unyielding, but she forces herself to look away, focusing on her escape. She bolts down the corridor, the whispers growing louder, filling the air with voices pleading, screaming, begging for release. They cling to her, each step feeling like wading through thick, unseen forces pulling her back. Just as she reaches the main hall, she stumbles, her vision blurring as shadows dance at the edge of her sight. She glances over her shoulder and catches a glimpse of figures, ghostly, indistinct forms of the Moore family, their faces contorted with sorrow and fear. Their eyes plead with her, begging her to understand, to remember their stories, as though she is their last hope of freedom. Pushing through the heavy front door, Claire stumbles out into the cold night air. She gasps, filling her lungs with the crisp, autumn scent, feeling the grip of the manor's shadow slowly loosen. She turns back, her heart pounding, and sees Aveline Manor looming in the darkness, its windows now empty and silent, the shadows within seeming to pull back, as if retreating into themselves. The book in her arms is a weight she cannot ignore, the secrets of the Moore family a testament to the suffering and mystery that the manor had held captive for so long. She knows that their stories must be told, that these souls deserve to be remembered. But as she leaves, she senses one final whisper on the breeze, a soft, lingering voice that seems to drift from the manor itself. Thank you. Claire doesn't look back as she makes her way down the path, leaving Aveline Manor and its shadows behind. But in the depths of her mind, she knows that a part of her will always remain there, bound by the memory of those she encountered, of the darkness she uncovered. And though the manor is far behind her, She can't shake the feeling that it watches her still, waiting, its shadows stretching out like fingers toward the one who dared to remember. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video,